message today is called, What Are You Hungry For? What are you hungry for? I get a lot of emails from people who have parenting questions. And I want you to know that this message is not just going to be about parenting today, because if it is, a lot of people just close it off. They just say, well, it's not to do with me. I don't have any children, or my children are grown, or I'm not even married. I don't have to worry about that. But I want you to understand that this applies to everybody, whether you are raising a child, going to raise a child, or you're a child of God. This has to do with you. You are under this today, okay? So a lot of times I think I begin a message and people say, well, that's not relevant. I don't want to read that. Don't want to see that video. Don't want to sit through this. Here in the room, you just maybe shut it down and think, well, I can just get through the time because, he's just going to go through a message, and maybe next week will be something that I can grasp. So today, the message is called, What Are You Hungry For? The verse we're going to start with is in Proverbs 22 and 6. Proverbs 22 and 6. This is a scripture that everybody here could quote, and sometimes when we do that, we use very familiar scriptures. We automatically say, I know what that means. Read it before, got it, checked it off, don't have to read it again. So let's look at it again. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he was old, he will not depart from it. The wisdom of Solomon is here for us to live by. The book of Proverbs is a book of the wise sayings of Solomon. They are here to help us to run our lives, to know how to live correctly, to live according to God's plan. This scripture is used over and over again in parenting classes in churches. Train up a child. There are books about it. Train up a child. It's all about raising children. And as I said, it's relevant for you too, because you are a child of God. And you have to have the same thing that a child does. You have to be discipled. You have to be encouraged. So let's look at this. He says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. First thing I want to point out is, he says to train up a child, meaning you do it. You do it. You take action. It's an action statement. Train up a child. If I tell Sarah to go get me a glass of water, that doesn't mean find somebody to bring me a glass of water, and I'm telling her to bring me a glass of water. God said, train up a child in the way he should go. Parents, train up your children in the way they should go. It is a complete 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week job to train up a child. It's in every waking second of your day, train up a child. It takes preparation. It takes preparation. Just as you plan a trip, if you're going to take a trip from here to New York, you plan the route to get there, don't you? Nobody just gets in the vehicle and starts driving and says, well, we're going to go to New York. How are we going to get there? What roads are we going to take? I don't know. We'll find the signs when we get there. There's no signs for New York here in Alabama, are there? You have to get pretty close to New York before you're going to see signs. And then you're going to know which direction to take. Life is that way too. You need to know a direction. You need to know a path. As parents, you need to have a plan plotted out, formed ahead before your child ever gets there. We have parents here this morning with babies less than 2 months old. We have parents here this morning with babies still in the womb. We have parents here this morning. You've not even met Mr. Right, but you're parents. And you have to plan ahead of what will my child be? What will the plan be for raising my child? What will I do? What will I allow? What will I not allow? Look at that next section. In the way he should go. Now, a lot of people highlight the phrase about training up a child, that in the Hebrew it had to do with the midwives giving an appetite to the child. Some people have said it was rubbing olive oil or something on the palate of the mouth, putting something in the mouth so that it would encourage an appetite or encourage them to want to eat or make them hungry, cause them to eat certain things. Train up a child is giving them an appetite for something. And when I named this, what are you hungry for? My thoughts on that were about the different cuisines of the world. Have you ever thought about the fact that wherever you live, your food is different than people even in the next state? In Alabama, we cook different than they do in Georgia and Tennessee. In the South, we cook different than the North. Right? I mean, people in the North don't know what grits are, you know? So we know what grits are, don't we? Mm-hmm. But we don't know what some of their things are. You know, they have foods that if we went up there to eat, we would probably look at it and turn the plate around and say, what is this? Mm-hmm. You know, we all have a different appetite according to what we were raised on. Yesterday, I got a hold of a really hot pepper, and I had to get a piece of cheese to stop it from burning my mouth. I didn't expect it to be that hot because I was just eating peppers out of the garden. Why is it that some people can sit and eat them like candy? Why is it some people crave that and some people desire that? Some people like spicy food. You know, when you have different types of food in the world that you're not used to, what has caused the differences in those? Think about it. What has caused the difference in people in China? They eat different food than we eat here. Well, we know that certain foods grow there better than they do here. Certain foods come from there. We don't have coconuts and bananas here in Alabama, but we eat them. At some point in your life, you tasted a coconut and you tasted a banana, didn't you? Mm-hmm. At some point, you had the opportunity to taste that. You've also eaten food that was not good for you, haven't you? Mm-hmm. You know? You've eaten food that was not good for you, and in some ways, you had to be limited by it or say, don't eat that, that's not good food. Normally, have you ever noticed that every food you eat, if you like it, you're just going to eat it? You'll say, well, I'll limit myself. That's not a good thing, is it? You know, we really do that. Spiritually, you're the same way. Well, I'll limit my intake of pornography. Think about it. It really sounds foolish when you say that. But for food-wise, we just say, well, I know that's not good for me, but I'm just going to eat it just once. You know? We have to train up a child in the way they should go, give them an appetite for the things that they need. Encourage them on the good things and discourage them on the bad. Now, I said I regularly get emails about raising children. I get a lot of people writing me saying, my child's out of control, what do I do? And my question always is, how old are they? And if they say they're 5 years old, you know, then that's a different story than if they're 16, right? Because at 5 years old, you're the parent, you're the complete parent, and you have complete control over that child. And a 5-year-old should not be able to match wits with an adult. But parents throw their hands up when they're 5 years old. I just don't know what to do. They just cry. They just scream. They just push me to the limit. You need to get that under control now. That needs to take place early. Training up a child begins immediately after they're born. Actually, I'd say it begins before they're born because you do need to prepare. What is this child going to be allowed? What is this child going to be taught? Husband and wives need to get together and be on the same page, don't they? Mm-hmm. They need to make sure that they know what's going on, so that when the time comes, when something is allowed or not allowed, the dad won't be saying, well, I want him to do this, and the mom says, well, I didn't want him to do that. I don't think that's right. You need to make sure you understand that and you be on the same page. When you've got a child, you're trying to teach them to eat good foods, that's what you serve them, isn't it? And you serve it to them early. Have you thought about that? You serve it to them early. When they're eating early in their life, you don't feed them chocolate pudding and desserts all the time, do you? You give them good meats and vegetables. And for some reason, when we give them free choice, we just say, well, they just like those desserts, and I can't make them eat their vegetables. I just can't do anything about it. Yes, you can. And if you don't, they're going to be obese adults, aren't they? They're going to grow up only liking dessert. And as soon as they get out from under mom and dad's authority and control, that's all they're going to eat. They're going to rot their teeth out. They're going to be overweight, have heart disease, all the problems with eating wrong. They're not going to live the life that God wanted them to live. Spiritually, the same way. If you say, well, I just can't help it, they just have these things they like to do, and I just want to let them be themselves. Guess what? Who themselves are depends on the parent. It's not a throw your hands back or cross your arms and say, well, let's just wait and see what he grows into. Let's just see who this child becomes. This child could be the president, or he could be an axe murderer. He could be a mass murderer, or he could be a senator. He could be the president of a company, or he could be a hobo on the street. You know, this child, let's just wait and see what he becomes. We don't do that, do we? That child becomes what the parent encourages him to do. Now, there are certain things in that child that you will see. For instance, that child might early on show the stages of an entrepreneur, that he is a businessman, or he likes to manage things, or he likes to take charge of things. And then you can encourage those gifts that he has. And that's being a godly parent. But he also is going to have things of the flesh that you're going to have to put down, that you're going to have to help him overcome. For instance, a baby can have a temper. Have you noticed that? They can be calm and peaceful, or they can have a temper. They can blow up. You know, at 2 months old, you can see them holding their breath because they're mad. What made that? Well, that's the flesh side of us. And we all have those things in us from birth. The flesh side of us, the things that you have to help that child overcome. Okay? So train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. When that child gets to be of age, when he's old, he won't stray from that. If you have started at the beginning, that child won't forget those things when he's old. Parenting, like I said, is all the time. It's not something that you throw at. When he said, train up a child, you train up a child, it's your responsibility, parent, that does not mean take them to daycare and let somebody else raise them. Now, I realize some parents have no choice. They're single parent families, and I don't want people to think that, you know, well, their child is lost because they can't take care of them. There's a lot of people struggling. If you have the ability, God wants you to raise your children the right way. Mothers need to be at home, don't they? Fathers need to be out taking care of the family and providing the income. And mothers need to be at home. And both parents have to raise that child. Both parents are responsible for raising them. I have another proverb over in chapter 21, Proverbs 21:5, that I want to include with this. The thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenteousness, but of everyone that is hasty only to want. The thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenteousness, but of everyone that is hasty only to want. I want to share that one with you because Solomon said, if you're diligent, you'll have plenty. If you're preparing ahead, you won't be in want or need of anything. You won't get down the road and throw up your hands and say, I need help. My child's out of control. What do I do? Now, you don't know misery until you felt it in a child out of control. You don't know desperation until you see a teenage son that is rebellious, that is destructive, that hates you, that there's no way that you can get the reins on that child You don't know desperation until you've gotten there. It is to your benefit and his to control things from the beginning. Now you do at some point have to start letting go and letting go and letting go and let that child take off. Just as if, in the image, if you want to get this mental image, you're helping a child ride a bicycle. You know the image I'm talking about? You walk along behind them and you're holding that bicycle. And they're pedaling and they're pedaling and you're holding it up. And you go around like that for a while. And when do you let go? When you feel them begin to balance, don't you? Mm-hmm. And sometimes they fall. You pick them up and you help them again. You walk along beside them. And there's that one point where you let go for good, isn't there? There's that one stage where you let go and they take off and they ride out of sight. And they don't need mom or dad there anymore. That's supposed to be a good thing when we teach our children to live on their own, to be self-dependent, yeah, self-resourceful, to take care of themselves. That's what the goal is, in a godly manner. Not to live in the party lifestyle that all the teens seem to be growing up in today. Of everyone that is hasty only to want. Of everyone that's hasty only to want. The opposite side of that is, if you don't plan, if you don't prepare, if you're not diligent, you're going to be in desperation. You're going to be in want. You're going to be writing letters and calling out and buying books much too late. How do I control this? How do I get this under control? And you're going to be years and years a sad parent praying for a child that's lost. So it is important for you to do this. It is important for you to start a child off right from the beginning, keep that child on course, and when the time comes to let go of the bicycle, you can. Okay, I've got several points I want to, it's actually 4 points I want to make here. If you're taking notes, you can write these down. First one is, always act in a manner that you want your children to act in. Always act in a manner that you want your children to act in. Your child can be told things, they can be instructed in things, they can sit under the teaching of the Word of God, but the loudest message they give is your actions. The loudest message is your actions. Children learn what you do. They are sponges. They are sponges. They take in everything they see you do. Do you like yelling in traffic? Do you like shaking your fist at drivers that cut you off? Do you like blowing your horn? Would you be surprised if your son grew up doing that? I have a friend who had this habit. When the light would change green, he wanted to go. He could be 10 cars back, but the light could change green, and all he could see is there's a green light, and we're sitting here still. And he was very impatient about it. And then when I was riding with him, I used to kind of chuckle, because every time he'd be talking to me, he'd look up, he'd say, "Why is the light green? We're not going." And he told me one day, this little girl's voice from the back seat said, "Why is the light green and we're not going?" This little 4-year-old girl saw a light that was green. And she said, "Why is the light green? We're not going." She was not even driving. But she had learned that from her dad. Now that's a cute little story. Unless it's something disastrous that you're doing as a parent. You know, for instance, do you like to gossip? Do you like to talk about people? Would you be surprised if your children didn't turn out to be gossips? Sadly, every flaw we have, your children will see, and they will pick up on it. And that will be normal for them. That will be what life is. That's the way life's supposed to be. Does the dad yell at the mom? Does the mom yell at the dad? They're going to grow up thinking that's a normal relationship. They're going to grow up thinking that marriage is screaming. That it's normal for husbands and wives to yell at each other. That it's normal to fight. That it's normal for one of them to storm off and leave the house and burn rubber going down the road. That's normal, because I saw my dad do it. Is it normal for a wife to call her husband stupid? If a child grows up in that and sees the mother cutting down the dad, you know, he walks out the door and he's not hearing, and your father's so stupid. Would you be surprised if you raised some children that grew up that way? Because that's what they see, and that's normal. What about if a husband or if a dad tells his son, you know, you can't trust women with money. You know, you can't just trust them with money, because you got to hide money from them, because they'll spend every penny. That's actually something I've heard men say. And they teach their sons that. And their sons grow up thinking they can't trust their wives. You know, we all have these things that we see in life that we see as normal. And we've grown up in that thinking that's right, because we saw dad or mom doing it. Well, consequently, you raising a child, you need to be careful what you say, what you're doing. The eye roll is picked up. I hate to tell you that. Not even words. Manners are picked up. You know what I'm talking about? You roll your eyes at your husband or at your wife. You mumble under your voice. Children will pick up on that. They will see that. That's normal. That's what I do. I did it because my mom or dad did it. So we have to be very careful and act in a manner that you want your child to act in. Now, you can't technically go in front of a mirror all the time, but you need to understand that you got a little 3-foot mirror following you around. You know? I remember when one of the children, when they was very young, said a string of ugly words, all in the right manner, you know, at 4 years old. And I said, where did you hear those words? You know, I heard it from so-and-so, was an older person, family member, you know. heard this string of ugly words. I said, well, that's not nice words, and we shouldn't say that. Okay. Didn't know any better. That was normal. So we have to be very careful what we say. Second point. Be careful who influences your children. Be careful who influences your children. Now, I just told a story about a child that was influenced by an outside source, not in the immediate family. Okay, still a family member, but an older person, you know, outside the immediate home. Picked up these ugly words. Your child is greatly influenced by other sources. When they're young, preschool years, still at home, mom and dad are it. All they see is mom and dad. That's their world. And very soon, when they get to be school age, not even if they're not going to school, but if they're homeschooled, if they're school age, they start associating with other children more, don't they? They start getting friends. They start doing things at other churches. They start meeting people. They start being broadened. And in that broadening, their lives are touched by other homes, other parents' influences, other ideals. Their lives are being formed. And they say, well, we never did that in our home. And the child says, well, that's what we do. Well, the child uses words and says, well, this is what we say in my home. And because a child wants a friend so bad, they'll start saying that. Peer pressure is a very strong thing, isn't it? Peer pressure. You know, we really only need one friend that's right for us to stick with. But if none of the people in our group, none of our peers are godly people, we will be drawn that way. We will be drawn that way. Relationships only go as high as the lowest level of morality. Do you know that? That's as high as they can go. It's the lowest level in the group. You know, we always think, well, we're all men of God, we'll pull this guy up. No, he'll probably pull you down. If you let him in as an equal, he'll pull you down. He'll start wanting to be inclusive. He'll start saying, well, you know, you should accept everybody. Judge not. Well, you know, I never thought about it that way. Well, we don't want to offend our new brother. And you will not pull him up. He will pull you down. Okay? So be careful who influences your children. When a child is from birth to about 12 years old, 11 or 12 years old, their parents are kings. You know, I don't mean that in a bad way, but their parents are it. They look to their parents as the great influences, as Dad's always right, Mom's always right. And something happens, and we always say when they enter their teen years, but something happens about that time when people that we think are genius come into our lives, you know, and they influence us, and they start telling us things that we never knew before, and we just think they're brilliant. You know, your dad, he's been telling you this, and that's not true. You know, Mom said that to you, but that's not true. And we start getting these outside influences that lead us the wrong way. I had an older brother. He was 2 or 3 years older than me, and he started teaching me about girls when I began to be about that age. He started telling me all about girls, all about dating, all about going out. He had it all wrong. You know, he didn't have any of it right. He was teaching me the wrong things. But I thought he was a genius at the time. And I looked up to my older brother and I thought, you know, he knows all about girls. He's very experienced with girls. You know, he wasn't. He was 15 years old, you know. And so instead of going to my dad asking for advice, I was listening to brother. So we have people like that. They can even be assembling. We have people like that that start influencing us more than parents at that stage. So we have to be careful about that. And I get parents ask me, well, you know, my child just started playing with this kid next door, and what do I do? What do I do? You know, I can't do anything about it. Can't do anything about it. What do I do? Yes, you can. You're still the parent. You are the parent. Have you forgotten? When you're the parent, you're in charge. God put you there for a reason. Don't act like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Let me ask you this. If you saw a blasting cap brought in by your child, and he says, I found a new toy, would you say, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm afraid he'll blow his hand off with that blasting cap. You know, stick of dynamite. My son brought in a stick of dynamite. I don't know what I'm going to do. My kid's playing with a guy that uses drugs. I don't know what I'm going to do. What's the difference? What is the difference? Why do we as parents assume that we can't do anything about it? We just have to pray. I just pray that he don't blow his hand off. I just pray that that kid that's doing drugs doesn't influence him. Don't be so foolish. You can limit who your child plays with. You can limit who they are influenced by. Now, my next point, don't overlook obvious influences. Don't overlook the obvious influences. What I'm talking about is TV and the media, television and the media. And we made a point years ago to shut off broadcast television, didn't we? You know, and it made a big difference in my children. It made a huge difference. They, not only of the obvious things of immorality, violence, sex, you know, attitudes toward parents that all the little sitcoms seem to be pointed toward. They make the parents out to be idiots, and the children are running things. The children are the wise adults in the series, and the parents are just blundering idiots. Not only do they miss out on that, but there's an entire world of influence that children miss out on. It's a good thing that they miss out on it. The media. Have you ever seen a child comes in and they've seen a commercial and they want that? I want one of those. I remember using these words right before Christmas time every year when I was a child. That's what I want. That's what I want. Have you noticed they always play the the commercials about the new toy on the market right before Christmas. Right before Christmas, they're playing those commercials for your child to see. That's what I want. When you go through the checkout aisle in the grocery store, have you noticed what's right there as you get funneled in? Have you ever thought about if that candy and chewing gum thing was somewhere in the store that you wouldn't be focused to it, but it's right there in the checkout aisle? And it's about this high, isn't it? About the head height to a child. And it's there for a reason. Because the child says, "Can I have one of these, Mama?" No, put that back. "Can I have one of these, Mama?" No, put that back. And eventually Mom will say, "Okay." Just get tired of it and they give in. Well, the media is that way. I'm sure Saturday morning, and we haven't seen television in years and years, but I'm sure Saturday morning has commercials geared to your children. They have things to influence your children. The teenage shows at night, the sitcoms that are more for teenagers, preteens, those shows are influencing your children. Do you think that they're not? Let me tell you something. When the movie E.T. came out, E.T., the little alien, he ate Reese's Pieces. Reese's Pieces, a type of candy. He ate them at one point in the movie, just one short clip. He didn't eat them all through the movie, but he found some and ate them. Do you know that after that movie came out, the sales for Reese's Pieces skyrocketed? Reese's Pieces, that sounds good. Honey, let's go get some. Now, you don't think about saying things like that. That sounds kind of silly. But subliminally, the message is planted in you. The next time you're watching a movie, next time you're watching something, start looking for the brand names that are in the backgrounds. Start looking for a car going down the street and there's a Pizza Hut they drive by. That's not by accident. It might be a 2-second Pizza Hut building as it goes by, but that's not by accident. They pay the producers to be on that movie. It's a commercial. It's a free commercial, or not free, but it's a commercial that they can get in there every time you see that. I hadn't thought about Pizza Hut in a while. Let's go to Pizza Hut. Burger King. I haven't thought about Burger King. I want a Pepsi. I want to get me a Pepsi. And those things are in there to influence you, and they do. They're there to influence you. If those little things like that influence you, what about ideals? What about things that portray thoughts to change your mind on moral issues? There was a movie a few years ago called Cider House Rules. Cider House Rules. The movie had an agenda to teach you that abortion was okay if it was okay with the parents. That was the agenda. Now you can read the write-up on the movie. You can probably get online and read, the movie write-up, and you would see nothing about that. It would be nothing about, this movie is based on an agenda by the abortion rights group. But that's what the movie had. It had an agenda in it. When you're watching things like that, you will be influenced by them. It will be a thought that you, at best, will have to battle. Think about it. You will, at your very best, if you're a firm foundation Christian that really would be hard to shake you, it's be one more thought you'll have to battle. Have you ever been watching something, a movie, listening to something, the type of music, and something just dawned on you? Wait just a minute. That's not normal what they just said, or where did that come from? Or they have a token, some type of person they put in there to influence you. That's out of place. Why did they put that in there? That's the reason. It's thrown in there as an agenda. And when you, as a mature Christian, sense that, someone who is immature, your child, is not going to pick up on it. You may see it for what it is, but they're not going to. Say, I never thought about really abortion as a person's right. I never thought about it being, it's not really my decision. if they should do that or not. It's just it's their choice. So, I never thought about that. And your child will be swayed. Now, I've said this over and over again. Children go off to college, and they come back different as far as their moral rules. They may leave that they were raised in church, and they go off to some brilliant professor that tells them everything your mom and dad told you was false. And I can show you in the book where what they said is false. And they will blast their faith. And all the people in the room will turn around and look at them and say, "You believe that?" And they will be the only person there. And they won't stand up for what they believe. And they'll come back 4 to 6 years later, a different person, someone you never thought they would grow into be. So you have to be careful about outside influences. Not just the TV and the media. And by media, I mean, the music, the latest music that's out, the latest singers, actors and actresses, all the people that somebody wants to idolize when they're young. They want heroes, and they're looking for heroes. And mom and dad need to be the heroes, and they need to point their children to godly heroes, which are out there. Okay? The words of songs, music is not benign. You catch that? Music is not a benign thing. It has power. It moves. It moves our emotions. I can be tuning the radio and turn by something, looking for news or weather, traffic reports. That's really all I'm looking for. And I can tune by something, and it can play 10 seconds and something that I heard in high school. I'm talking about 10 seconds of a song that in my teen years I heard. Something I haven't thought of in years, and the thought will come back. An instance in high school, an old flame, something I did with the boys when I was a teenager, riding around. Something like that came back, and almost every time, now I'm talking about 10 seconds of my time, I can tune right on past it, and almost every time, the next morning when I wake up, that song is in my head. Now, I don't say that that's for everybody, but I'm telling you the power of music. Almost every morning when that happens to me, and I'll wake up, I do it every time. My eyes open up and I'm thinking, I hate that. I hate that can't be controlled, that in my subconscious sleep, that's playing around. That music is playing around that I didn't want to. That's a station I didn't want to tune to in my head, but I'm having to listen to it. When I go back over the songs of my teen years that my mom and dad said, that's not good to listen to that, and I would go off in my car and I'd listen to it anyway. In my bedroom when everything was quiet, I'd turn on the headphones and I'd listen to it anyway. When I go back over the lyrics of those songs, I'm shocked. That if I had known the lyrics back then even, I wouldn't have listened to it. I didn't know what the words were saying. Some songs I still, to this day, couldn't tell you what the words were. But if I go back and look at the lyrics, it's not something that I want children to listen to. Okay? So don't overlook the obvious influences. Number 4, look ahead to the end result of things you begin. Look ahead to the end result of things you begin. If you're planting a seed, or seed is being planted, you need to look for the fruit of it. Have you ever picked up a seed just in the woods and you didn't know what it was? And you say, let's plant it and see what happens. Have you ever thought that it might grow in a kudzu? We was walking the other day and we saw seed pods on the kudzu, and I commented to Angie, I didn't know that kudzu had those seed pods. And they're out right now. They're on the vine. They're dropping off. I thought they spread by the tubers and the roots underground, that was the only way they spread. But it makes sense the way that you can have a patch of kudzu here in the south away from everything else. How did it get there? Seeds got carried there. So there are seeds to it. And if you was holding that seed in your hand, you're holding something that will produce something. If your child has a seed being planted in them, they are about to produce. If it is left to grow, it will produce something, good or bad. Good or bad. It can be bad fruit, can't it? It can be bad fruit or good fruit. So, look ahead to the end result of things that you begin. This is an example. A parent came to me one time and said, my son is so violent. He beats up on his sister, and I don't know what's got into him. You know, he's just gotten in this aggressive mode. And I said, well, knowing that it came from somewhere, I said, well, do you have an anger problem? You know, just be honest with me. Do you have a temper? No, I really don't. I don't have an anger problem, and my wife doesn't. I said, okay. Well, what kind of hobbies does he have? What kind of things does he do? Well, let's see. He likes to fish. I signed him up for karate last year. Wait just a minute. You signed your son up for karate, and now you're wondering why he's violent. No. And that's not to even mention that he probably watches karate movies, that he probably watches movies with action and violence, and he's got all these other influences. That child hadn't got a chance but to be violent, does he? That's the only thing he can turn out to be, because he's had all these seeds planted. His garden can grow nothing but anger and violence. So when you take your child to karate, when you sign them up for something like that, think ahead. What's going to be the outcome of this? What's going to be the outcome of this? I was just a few months ago thinking about people that choose football teams. You know, they like football teams, college football. And I asked people through the years, what made you choose that? Now, the legitimate answer is, that's where I went to school. I went to Auburn, went to Alabama, went to Jack State, wherever. I went to school there. That's my alma mater. I understand that. I went to a small school called Hoke's Bluff. You know, Hoke's Bluff. Green and white was the colors, and the Eagles were the mascot. The Hoke's Bluff Eagles. I didn't go to school in Lineville. I didn't go to school in Birmingham. So if I liked those teams, that would be a little unusual for me, I would think. But for people to like these teams based on nothing except that I think they're better, or I like the colors. Somebody told me that one time. I think orange and white's better than crimson. I like orange better than crimson. You know, you're laughing because it's true. It is that silly, isn't it? We like teams because our buddy liked them. My dad liked them. We didn't ever go to school there, but we like them. You know, I like their mascot. I like their colors. Well, I don't want to step on any toes, but I am using that as an illustration. We influence our children, don't we? And they are influenced by somebody to the point where they like certain hobbies. Now, hobbies are not always bad. A kid's mind likes to do something. They need to keep their mind busy. But karate is not a good hobby. Okay? Karate is not a good hobby. So don't get your child in things that will produce fruit that will be bad. You know, and I've heard these people say, this is Christian karate. Give me a break. Don't be so foolish as to act like that. When you tie the word Christian to it, it doesn't make it any better. It's still violence. Right? Amen. Amen. It's okay for you to say amen in here every now and then. Look for the fruit of the seed you're planting. When you have a seed, you don't know what it is, you better check it out. If you're interested in growing it, put it in a pot. See what happens in the pot. If it turns out to be a Jimson weed, which is a bad thing, by the way, kill it. Do away with it, right? You don't plant things in your children or let things be planted in your children. And if you see something growing in them, you stop it. Well, I'm paid up to the end of the year for this karate, Brother Paul. Well, don't be a fool. Don't be so foolish as to think that your child is going to continue in that. When you pinpoint he's beating up on his sister, he's being violent and more angry toward you, he's beginning to feel a little bit of self-control and I'm going to be in charge of things, because his teacher has taught him that. You know, with karate, you are in control. So the next time you go into your teenage son's room and you try to tell him to stop something, that's going to come up. I'm in control because I know karate. You know? But we can't see that far ahead many times in raising children, can we? We can't go that far ahead. So we have to, what am I going to allow my child to do? What am I going to influence them to do? What do I want to pass along to them? Have you ever seen someone who likes to deer hunt or just hunt in general? And when the child is not even able to comprehend, they dress them in camouflage. You know, they dress them in camouflage. Get a little orange cap for them. You know, as soon as they're able to play with toys, they get them a little toy bow, a little gun, and then they have them target practicing when they're 4 years old. Dad loves hunting and he wants to make his son into a hunter. He wants to share that with him someday. That's not all bad, but you need to understand where the fruit can take him. You're molding that child into you instead of molding that child into who he needs to be. Instead of picking up on the natural gifts that God put in him and encouraging those to grow. Now, Angie is the master gardener here. I'm a gardener, but I always go to her for advice because she does a lot of studying. She has more time to read. She grew that 8-pound sweet potato, by the way. That was the biggest sweet potato I've ever seen, growing in that raised bed. And we didn't even write on there that it was all organic. There was no fertilizer or anything used in that. That was what's so funny. But she knows about gardening. There's some wisdom there that I look to in growing things. If I go to plant next spring, and she said, no, we can't plant the tomatoes here because we planted them there last year. We need to rotate. We need to plant them in a different place. You know, we need to move things around. Then I listen to that. So you will get wisdom from different directions when you're a parent that you need to listen to. Dads, you need to listen to your wives. Wives, you need to listen to the dads. Okay? You need to listen to each other, the wisdom that God shows you. If the wife says, honey, I've been studying about karate and I just don't think it's a good thing, and the dad says, yeah, but I did karate and look, I turned out okay. Honey, I don't know if you need to encourage our child in the deer hunting because, you know, even though I don't have a problem with you doing it, I just don't think that a child should be shooting a bow at 4 years old. You know, especially with the broadheads on the end there. You know, I think that's wrong. No, he can handle it. This is my son. You need to be listening to each other. Okay? Be listening to each other. Just as children are influenced by all these sources, and you say, well, I'm the adult here. You can be influenced too. You can be greatly influenced. Have you ever seen someone who takes off in a direction about golf? They never even watched golf on television, never knew anybody that played golf, but they got with all the guys at work, you know, hey, Paul, do you play golf? No. Well, all us guys, we play golf. You know, on Saturday, we're going to play golf. You want to come with us? Well, I really am not interested in it, but I do, you know, want to have friends, and so I go down or I ride around, watch them play golf, and next thing I know, I'm buying golf clubs. You know, I bought me a golf cart, and I'm reading golf books and buying golf magazines, and, you know, my life becomes all about golf. Well, what started that? A seed was planted. Someone said, you play golf? You know, do you deer hunt? Do you do this? And as an adult, you can be influenced and you can be led in that direction. And that can become your whole life. Where you might have been a stable dad, stable husband. And I'm not saying golf is a bad thing. I'm just using it as an example. that you are influenced also. As going back to the title, what are you hungry for? You have an appetite for something. You know, I never ate guacamole till I was an adult. I didn't. I never even knew what, I never heard guacamole. That was a Spanish word that I didn't know if it was, somebody was calling me something when they said guacamole. You know? A celebration, guacamole. But then I found out what guacamole is, and I like guacamole. I remember the first time I ever ate a steak that was not from something we had butchered at home, where Mom just cooked it and we ate it. I didn't know there were different kinds of steaks. And I think I was 14 years old, and I went to a steakhouse with a Sunday school class making a field trip. And I had my money with me, and I got up there in line, and it was one of those where you take your tray and you slide through and you tell them what you want, and then they cook it and bring it to you. And I went through there, and there was about 10 kinds of steaks. And I looked at my friend and said, "What? How do you know what to get?" They said, T-bone, sirloin, you know. I didn't know what all those steaks were. I didn't know what the cuts were. I didn't know what they tasted like. All I knew is Dad raised cattle, and, you know, we'd have them butchered. And they came out of the freezer, and Mom would cook it, and we'd eat it. I didn't know it was a cut. And I never knew that. I remember the first time that I ever ate Chinese food, I was 22 years old and had never eaten Chinese food before, never been to a Chinese restaurant. Didn't know all the cuisines of the world. I was influenced by those things just as you will be, just as you are. All those things come into your life, something you never thought of before. You're influenced by those even as adults, even as not the parents of the children, but as Christians, you are influenced by those things. And someone says, "Sarah, did you ever think about this? Have you heard this new singer? Have you heard this kind of music?" And you will listen to it because, not that it's got good music, but because everybody else listens to it. I mean, face it, when we hear a certain cultural music, we know what country that represents, don't we? You know, if it's very ethnic of that country, we know that that's what they listen to. There's a station in Atlanta that's a Hispanic station, and it plays that papa kind of Mexican music, and I'm always turned on, and it's always fun to me to listen to, because it's always the same kind of music, It almost all sounds the same, and I'm sure Mexican people would listen to my music and say, that all sounds the same to me, because you're playing the same 4 instruments, you know. And the words vary a little bit, but it's the same music. We recognize that as Mexican music, don't we? And we know that that's what it is. Well, what makes those people like that music? It's the same thing. They were influenced at an early age. They grew up listening to that. They hung around people that listened to that, and that was normal for them. And if you listen to a bunch of guys at work talking about golf, talking about deer hunting, you know, you can be pulled into that where you would not normally have made that decision on your own. Now, you see things that are natural interest, and I'll give you an example. I like astronomy. I have a telescope. I like looking at the stars. I never had friends that liked that. It's something that I liked. I read about whatever, and I made choices that it was an interest to me. But I don't have any astronomist friends that I hang out with. When things like that develop in you, be careful about it. Don't go off to the extreme, the ungodly sense. For instance, I could take that and say, you know, what about astrology? What about astrology? Taking the stars and, you know, trying to wrap, you know, your life around it, that events in your life are based on the stars and the occult. If I took it that direction, then it would be evil, it would be wrong. If I took it to the point where it interfered with my life, where I was always making these field trips and not spending time with my family like I should, not being with them like I should, if I used this hobby as something that took away from my family, then it would be wrong. So anything can become a bad thing like that in your life. But you need to look for the things of interest. And let's turn to Philippians chapter 4. I want to go over one of our key verses for our family, Philippians 4:8. There are a lot of nuggets in the Word of God, and this is one of them. This is one of the things that you can use for a litmus test, so to speak, of ideals. Okay? Philippians 4:8. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Now, I mentioned years ago about us, the fact that we stopped watching broadcast TV. And y'all remember how that happened. Y'all remember how we put this verse up. We printed it big enough to be seen across the room on a big piece of paper, this entire verse, and we put it up by the television. And I said, okay, here's the rule. If you come across the channel and you look over to the side and it doesn't fit this, then you can't watch it. I don't remember who it was that came to me and said, after about 3 weeks, and said, there's nothing that we can watch. You know? Dad, there's a problem. We can't watch any of that. Why not? Well, it doesn't fit Philippians 4:8. Your life and your children's lives need to be guided by this. Your thoughts need to be guided by this. Is it true? Is it honest? Is it just? Is it pure? Is it lovely? Is it of good report? If it's got virtue? If it's praiseworthy? Underline those things. Put it on the dash of your car. If you're driving down the road and you find yourself thinking about something and you look down there and God's Word comes alive to you, you can stop thinking about that. Do you want to control your thoughts? Do you want really control over your emotions? Are you having trouble with your temper, your lust, your anger, your desires? Do you have trouble battling things? Your thought pattern is not being led in the right direction. Just as you have to give your children appetite for things, you get appetite for them too. I don't know how many people I've heard that read Playboy for the articles. I just read it for the articles. You know, I wasn't born yesterday. I just read it for the articles. It's got some good articles. The writers in there are really excellent. They write, you know, a political side that I can't get anywhere else. No. You're not fooling me. You're not fooling God. For some reason, you're fooling yourself if you think that's true. You're not reading it for the articles. Is it true? Is it honest? Is it just? All these things are clear. Think on these things. You know, that music that you're listening to, is it teaching you about something that doesn't fit these? The TV that you watch, the things that they cause you to want, the commercials in between, what they want you to have. Does it fit this? Have you noticed what they use to sell cars? There's usually a model involved. You know? It's not just about the car, the performance. It's the style of the car. You finally arrived in life. You deserve this. You deserve it. You deserve it. I'm going to finish up to say that you need to train your children in the way they should go, and you need to watch your own life of the influences, because your appetite is based on something, isn't it? And we're going through some dietary changes here. You know, some health changes. We've made decisions to change the type of food we eat and the recipes that we have, and we're going to start eating different things, and we do that seasonally anyway, depending on what's coming out of the garden. But we've started realizing some things about our health, some things that doctors never told us, some things that doctors didn't bother sharing with us because they could always throw another pill out, and doctors sometimes do that. You can change your appetite. You can change what you eat. Are you used to drinking soft drinks all the time? You know they're not good for you. But do you have a problem craving one? You need to stop those. You need to cut them back, don't you? You drink them every meal? What's wrong with water? I don't like the way water tastes. Why is that? Why is it that you don't like the way water tastes? Because you've been given sugar. Right? You've been given flavorings. And you're used to that. The same way I'm not used to eating a pepper. I could be if I ate that all the time. If a lot of the food that I ate had that flavor in it, that would be normal for me. So the same way you can have something that looks normal and it may not be. If someone views your family and says, you know, I know that you're a man of God, but you're allowing this in your family, you need to question that and say, well, wait a minute, maybe I thought it was normal, but maybe it's not. You know, maybe it's not. Maybe I need to question that. Maybe I need to talk to my children about that. Maybe I need to reconsider and pray about that. If someone from an outside family, another person who's not in your family says that, maybe you need to consider it. Okay? Is there something you can do to improve? Everybody in here thinks they're good drivers. If I say, are you a good driver? Yeah. Are you a good parent? Yes. I saw a man in a store not long ago who had tattoos all over his body. He had pierced ears and pierced body parts, and when his 5-year-old son came out, he had an earring. He had an earring. A 5-year-old could only be influenced that that's normal or good by a man who's lost, or by a man who really he didn't know it was wrong either, or he wouldn't have done it. 5-year-olds don't normally punch holes in their ears, do they? And that's what you're doing to a 5-year-old. If you took that 5-year-old from another family that had never seen that before and said, come here, Tommy, we're going to punch a hole in your ear and put a little gold ring in there, and it's going to be really good, he would probably run off screaming, wouldn't he? But this 5-year-old had grown up in this thinking this was normal. So just because you think you're a good parent, just because you think your life's in order, it's probably not. You probably have something you need to change about your life. Because you think tattoos and pierced body parts are normal. Well, that's great. That's a great thing. Everybody's doing that. You know, oh, that's so good. And everybody comments about mine. So I want my son to have that same thing. You know, that's normal for them. But it's not right, is it? So we need to look at what's right. Philippians 4:8. Whatsoever things. Whatsoever things. All right, let's close in prayer. Father, I ask that you work in our lives today. Help us to see things that have given us an appetite for things that we shouldn't have in our life. Help us to recognize those things. Lord, we are spiritually eating things, spiritually consuming things, spiritually craving things that are not right in our lives, and that are not good things. They're not of a good appetite. Help us to recognize those things in our lives. Lord, as we as parents have children to raise, I pray for all of those who have young children that they might see better as parents what to do to train up the children in the way they should go, that they would take an active part in it. Lord, I pray for the adults, those who may not have children or ever have children, or their children may be grown. I pray for them that the outside influences would not be there that would lead them in the path that you don't want them to be in. I pray for all of us, Lord, here in this room, that we might have a desire for the things of God, have a hunger for the things of God. Lord, have a distaste for the things that are not of God. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.